Wow.
I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is Trilloquy, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music. That's right, make sure your phone is off. We have company today.
Make sure it's off. I got to get a picture.
Oh, yeah, get the
All right,
photo.
everybody say cheese.
So great to be here.
Some of you closed your eyes.
So we're so thankful to be here for this first live opus of Trilloquy. How do you feel, Scott?
We
made it.
This is very comfortable for me, and I have to say that both Garrett and I spend so much time sitting in that room and talking to a microphone. It's nice to see you. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and so I'm taking some mental pictures because I'm going to be talking to you on Thursday night. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so be listening in.
So this isn't just a very special live opus of Trilloquy. We're celebrating a very phenomenal woman today.
The 200th anniversary of Clara Wieck's birth. Raise your hand. How many people are familiar with Clara Wieck's music? Okay.
That's a good amount, yeah.
So about half. How many people are familiar with Robert Schumann's music? Robert.
Okay.
Look at
more
that.
people there.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you, Scott?
That tells me that Clara was a victim of her time.
Yeah.
Right? There are so many stories that are coming to everybody's attention now about just how phenomenal of a pianist she was, about how thoughtful of a composer that she was, and yet due to the time that she was living, almost all of the focus was going over to Robert. In fact, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but she would write in her diary about how frustrating it was that all of her work had to be kind of put on hold whenever Robert was doing his thing.
Yeah. And, one of the important things I've been thinking about when it comes to Clara Schumann and her legacy is that, yes, we connect her to her husband Robert and even to Brahms, to Johannes Brahms.
Right.
But, not only is she one of classical music's most important women, she's one of classical music's most important people. I mean, her music is phenomenal. We have the pleasure of hearing some of it today live performed. And they're actually the first folks we're going to listen to. So just to let you know how we've sort of put this opus of Trilloquy together, we think of Clara Schumann as a musician, but so much more. We think of her as a muse, and of course we think of her as a mother. She was a mother of 8. Do you think you could handle 8 little ones at home? Clara could, all while being the composer and the musician that she was.
I just have this picture in my mind of Robert sitting there with all of those kids while she was out on tour, and him sitting there thinking, I'm supposed to be the guy on tour, or
maybe she was just the better composer who deserved to be on tour. How about that?
That's probably what was happening.
Oh, okay, yeah, I hear a couple gasps or groans. Okay, well, how about we jump right in? So the first folks we're going to talk to today, Scott, are the musicians who are going to provide us with the incredible music tonight. So please welcome Ines and Sofia to the stage, everyone. Thanks so much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
So Ines, I want to start with you. How about you let everyone know what your affiliation with classical NPR was as an intern?
So about a year ago, so in 2018, yes. In January, I was hired to be a digital classical intern here at NPR. And it was kind of a dream come true because I remember first coming to Minnesota when I was 15 and seeing NPR and whispering to my friend, I wish I could work there one day. And it was really a wonderful experience. And I got to experience not only, the digital classical area I was working within, but also I got to branch out and talk to so many cool people and sit inside of a lot of recording booths. And it was just such a wonderful experience for me.
How did the two of you meet?
Oh, wow. We met about 9 years ago in a summer festival in Michigan. We're both born in Venezuela.
Was this Interlochen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Interlochen Arts
Shout
Camp.
out to Traverse City.
Yes, yeah. Long trip. At that time, I was still living in Venezuela. She was Her parents are from Venezuela, and so we just, like, oh, we're Spanish speakers and stuff. And I mentioned that my family was moving to Costa Rica, and she's like, really? I live in Costa Rica. And I was like, oh, awesome. Like, I'll call you once I get there and stuff. And turns out we lived a block away from each other. I know. What are the odds? And then after that, a couple of years after, she came to Minnesota to finish high school. And I followed along like 2 years after. And so we basically graduated from the same high school and are in the same university now. Yeah.
Wow.
Destiny wants us together.
Collaborating, yeah.
Clara was like 10 or 11 years old when she started playing and touring and everything. So when did you two get started? And when did you start?
It's a little bit complicated. I did start music lessons when I was much younger, but I really started doing piano, like consistent lessons and everything when I was 13. So I was actually kind of late, and I arrived to the institution that I really started playing piano at, which was called the Instituto Superior in Costa Rica. And that was basically when my professor sat me down and said, you have a lot of catching up to do.
But it seems like you've caught up, though.
I sure hope so.
What about you, Sofia? When did you get started?
I started when I was 5 years old. The school, my mom put my sisters and I in, it had a very big music program. And so basically they made you choose an instrument. Like you had to play an instrument. Age 5 or 4, and I wanted to play the cello because all my friends were doing cello. I was like, Mom, I want to play the cello, and she's like, no, you never see the cello, like the cellist as soloist. Like, why don't you do violin?
But of course you do.
Oh, yeah. My mom's not a musician.
Okay.
You can tell. And so, she's like, once you master the violin, you can switch to cello. I was like, okay. Once you master it, like...
Yeah, do you ever really master it?
Yeah. So I stick to it.
On one of the earlier opuses, Garrett was talking with a pianist about being a collaborative artist rather than accompanist.
Oh, you said the A word.
Yes.
Mark, can you bleep that up there, please?
Why is it important for musicians and classical music lovers to stay away from that A word, accompanist, when it comes to music that includes piano?
I think it's a delicate topic because we should never forget that there are collaborative pianos out there, and that is the C, or the collaborative pianos, right? And in their resumes, they do put we accompany, but there is really just such a difference between the idea of accompanying, which is, I think, more the idea of you do a reduced orchestra score and you help somebody who's preparing to play with an orchestra, get a feel of the orchestra.
Right.
Versus what we will do today, which is collaboration, which is actually something that we played for our professors. And my professor mentioned when the first time we played it, he said, you're playing this like it's a violin piece. It's for both of you. And that really we really had to think of it that way. We really had to think about the conversation between the instruments. We had to think about the fact that just because I'm behind her doesn't necessarily mean that I need to act that way when I play.
Right. And when I think of Clara Schumann's music, in my mind, I go more to chamber music. She did have some incredible orchestral music, but her chamber music, in my opinion, is the real sweet spot of Clara's catalog. So, Sofia, based on what Ines just said about treating this not as a violin piece and, a piece for violin and piano, as it's titled, by the way, how do you approach this differently, understanding the collaborative nature and the intimacy that chamber music requires?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm always trying to listen for what she's doing. Every phrase, the way she wants it, and we talk about how we want it. It's not just solo piece like, oh, I'm playing this my way, And so it's that exchange of ideas that makes chamber music such great,
you hear that, Scott? An exchange of ideas is important. So remember that next time we go into the booth, okay?
What do you say we hear some of this music?
And before we hear it, Inez, we spoke a little bit before we got started here. I wanted to ask you what you wanted everyone here to think about as they were listening, and I thought your pre-response was very poignant as far as really centering the music around Clara Schumann, just erasing your mind of everything that you know as far as her connections to Robert Schumann or Johannes Brahms. I kind of wanted to ask you about the question within that question. I mean, why is it so important to do that, to center Clara and her legacy and her music when we talk about compositions like the one you're going to play?
Well, as you mentioned before, she is a victim of her time, and in her diary she talks about her frustrations, and she was also very hard on herself on her diaries, and it was just proof that, as a woman, you live in society and you are part of society, and that can really get to you. And I think it would be very unfair to her that, given how far we've come, to look at her only in relation to her husband and even to Brahms, because it's almost painful to see somebody that achieved so much on her own right, who fought against those ideas as much as she could, be reduced to just somebody's wife that was kind of cool to listen to sometimes.
And of course, she was so much more, as we're about to hear.
She was so cool.
Yeah.
Every time I hear this piece or play the piece, I'm like, she is so cool. Like, she had a 61-year career path. Like, her career was spanned 61 years. Like, she was playing for a long time and had 8 children, right?
Yeah.
And so she was on tour and everything. Just I think she was great.
Well, how about the two of you get set up and let's hear a little bit of this music.
All right.
While they get set up, I'll tell you what you're going to hear tonight are 3 romances for violin and piano by Clara Schumann. She wrote this in 1853 when she was 34. Scott, I haven't yet seen 34, but you have. Were you writing music at 34?
I have seen 34 15 times.
And this piece of music was so popular that Henry V of Hanover said how ecstatic he was the first time he heard it. So if this is the first time you're hearing this music, I hope that you'll agree with Henry V. So this is the first movement of Clara Schumann's 3 romances for violin and piano. And we're actually going to hear the second two of those three romances in a bit. But up next, we would like, so now we've heard from Clara Schumann's legacy as a musician. So now we're going to explore her legacy as a muse. And we invited one of our newest muses. I have to tell you, Scott, after working all night, I'm always happy to see Melissa Dundis, but I'm really happy to see her today. She's the newest member of the C24 team here from Nebraska. Everyone, please welcome Melissa Dundis.
Hey, Melissa.
Hi, Scott.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I was just thinking about how next month it's going to be 13 years that I packed up everything, moved from Omaha here to the Twin Cities. Steps that you took how long ago now?
Oh, how long ago from moving?
Yeah, when did you land here?
July 16th, so just over 2 months ago.
Very good. Now, both Melissa and I worked at the same station, although we were separated by more than a decade. And I want to set the stage for you. KVNO was 9,000 watts, something like that, which means that if the wind blew just right, you could catch it on the outer suburbs of town. So I wanted to find out, also to give you a little bit of background on Melissa. She is also an incredible guitarist. She sings. She has a background in education, music education, right?
Right.
So all of these things she's going to be bringing with her to the microphone. And I just want to find out, what is your experience like so far here? What do you think?
I mean, it's been amazing. It's, the culture's different. You know, it's...
I wonder in what ways.
We were joking about this earlier, but it's like faster paced. People move quicker.
You guys are really selling Nebraska to me.
I like that. It's a little more laid back there. There are more cornfields than people. It's kind of a joke, but it's a true true joke. A lot of cornfields.
Well, one of the things that I was trying to think of a corn segue, but it went.
No, leave the corn to me.
Okay.
My mom always used to tell me I was corny.
Okay.
So.
Well, in your new role here at Classical NPR, one of the ways that folks can hear you regularly is on Saturday mornings talking to the little kids with Classical Kids Storytime.
Yeah,
Classical Kids Corner, of course. And when I think of that, and I think of Clara Schumann, I think of how she was a muse for so many people. We know the names Robert Schumann and Johannes Brahms largely in part to her performances. She would go around performing this music, and that's how that's still in the conversation. I wonder if you can draw any comparisons between Clara Schumann being a muse in that way and your being a muse in introducing all of this phenomenal music to folks over the radio and through your radio programs.
Yeah, I guess with my experience with, I studied classical guitar, and just a little background to get where some of my inspiration comes from is my professor he studied in Spain with a man named Maestro Segundo Pastor, who was born in 1916, and he studied classical guitar with Andres Segovia. So it's a very
Andres
close...
Segovia is your great-grand teacher.
So there's a very close line. And my guitar professor was a Vietnam veteran, and he came out of it. He was a jazz guitarist, and so I learned from a man that, of course, was really close to the teachings of Segovia, but he was eccentric, and he would just tell me all of these stories about when I learned the Viola Bush Prelude No. 1, how it, is starting in that minor key of E minor, and then it modulates to E major, and it's beautiful. So he was talking about being in the jungle, and he was just telling me all of these really unique stories, and then it's E major and the sun comes out. So I just heard some really eccentric, amazing stories from a man who could be totally masculine and dropping all sorts of curse words when I didn't have the perfect technique, which it's just how it was. He wasn't a very well-liked professor at at our college, but he was a very successful person. And I mean, I didn't take it for granted. So I had such just a unique experience with the education that I got. And I saw someone who could be so up in your face, and then he could be so feminine at times and so soft and so endearing, like my father, you know? And so, and the way we would discuss music, that's kind of the message I try to bring to other people, like Capriccio Árabe by Francisco Tárrega's. Like, it's a romantic conversation between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
And those are just the kind of conversations that I would have when I would learn the music, and that was important to me. I had to have those kind of conversations. I'm a visual learner, so like it was just so helpful. So when I talk to kids, I kind of want to bring more visuals into it and ask them questions and how they can relate. And it's a tool. When you play music in front of somebody, an instrument or whatever, I mean, he told me things about myself that I was not planning on hearing in my music lessons.
You want to share any of those things?
Yeah, so I was playing the prelude from Bach's Cello Suite,
Sure.
number 1, and it's transposed. So I was playing it in D major on guitar. And there's accidentals throughout the piece, and I am such a daydreamer, and I get lost, and I wander, and I was supposed to be playing, I can't remember if it was a C natural or I forgot to, I was supposed to go back to C sharp, and you learn pieces, and you get all this muscle memory built up, and after a week of practicing, you know, it's hard to go back and relearn something, but he was just like, why did you play a C sharp there? When you're supposed to, or why didn't you play a C sharp? And I forgot to go back to the normal key signature. I was still playing the accidental, and I was like, I don't know.
My excuse in music school was always, I'm just feeling the music. That's what I'm doing.
But I'm such a daydreamer. I get so lost in thought, and part of it I'm grateful for, because I can visualize and I can tell stories, and that's how I think I can make the music my own and make it beautiful. But he's like, you know, sometimes when you're talking to somebody or meeting somebody in person, you're not really paying attention to what they're saying to you. You're just looking at them and like observing who they are and just trying to.
You hear that, everyone in the back row?
which I mean, I don't want that to come off as like I don't pay attention to
Sure.
people, but it's just. It can be used whether you're going to listen to classical music or whether you're going to study an instrument. It can be a tool for so many other things. And that's what I loved about teaching kids, is like, everybody's personality is so different, and the way they approach music and what they want to share with you, and you just learn what kind of people they are. And so it was just funny that he would point things out about me, and it just makes you a little, you have to be really vulnerable.
Yeah, and Scott, that connection to music and personality, sometimes you can't help but to feel like you knew some of these composers. Like, we know Clara Schumann in a way because we get to enjoy and really dive into what was most intimate for her, most personal for her.
Well, especially doing this work as we're getting ready to put a show together for you. We're doing all that research. We're combing through all these anecdotes, through historical facts, and trying to make it kind of come to life on the air as a complement to the music, not instead of, but as to prop it up.
I wanted to quickly ask you before we hear some more music. Do you consider Clara Schumann a personal muse in any way?
Yeah, I mean, like what I was just sharing now. I feel like she. Gave suggestions to Robert. I feel like she could see in him as a composer what his strongest points were, and I don't think she was afraid to share those kind of things.
Her father sure didn't see it.
And
It's true.
But she was trained on piano. She learned from her father, and then she had really close ties, I feel like, with him. And as a woman who grew up in a household where the man was in charge and you had to kind of follow all these specific rules, to me, the risks that she took, because they were the right risks, is still really inspiring, because that's got to be hard to have kind of that shadow of your father over you. I mean, there's a lot of insecurities that I worked through with the music, and it opened my eyes up to new things. So when I hear all of the things that she did, just because that was who she was, and it was because the right thing, and it's almost like they didn't have as heavy of an effect on her with that kind of relationship.
Right.
Which is really inspiring. And obviously she did all of the right things that, for the right reasons.
Well, how about we hear a little more of those right things? Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So far we've heard and explored Clara Schumann as a musician, as a muse, and finally we're going to explore Clara Schumann as a mother. Now, who here has heard of a show called Performance Today? Yeah, pretty popular show, right? Well, that show would not be possible without our next guest. She's a producer on Performance Today. Please welcome Meghann Oglesby and her daughter, Morgan. Hi, Morgan. Oh,
welcome.
And hello, Meghann. Meghann, well, first I want to say that I'm looking forward to your solo opus of Trilloquy that's coming up. We dive into some really great conversations.
Yes.
But the first thing I want to ask you about is working on Performance Today. What does it feel like to have such an important role on such an important show? When it comes to the world of classical music, Performance Today is way up there.
On a daily basis, you just don't feel the magnitude of that all of the time.
Yeah.
Until I hear somebody say it, I'm just like, that is my job, isn't it? I do work there. It's amazing. It's amazing. I get to do amazing, beautiful work that gets to touch the lives of people every single day, and I just can't be more grateful.
Yeah.
Couldn't be more grateful.
And we've already mentioned that Clara Schumann was the mother of 8 kids, and I think as we've made clear, one is plenty. For, in my imagination, I mean, talk to me about what it's like to be not just a working mother, but a working mother who works on such an important show. Again, I don't want to diminish at all how integral your job is to the production of that show.
Thank you. It's a grind. and
I'll be real.
It's look. You really want me to go there? No. Clara was the real MVP. Okay, 8 children. Jesus Christ! I just. Oh Lord. But people ask me all the time, they're like, how do you do it? How do you do all of this stuff? And I'm like, God,
Yeah.
What can I say? You just do your best. You do your best every day, and it helps to love what you're doing.
Yeah. And, in addition to being a working mother, Morgan has some very specific needs. Would you mind talking to us a little bit about that?
Yes. Morgan has a genetic disorder called CDKL5. It's a very, very rare genetic disorder, and it causes a lot of other things like epilepsy and developmental delays and many other things, which she has. And we recently found out that she had this genetic disorder just a few months ago, which was really wonderful to find out an answer for why does my child have epilepsy? Why has she been seizing since she was 2 months old? And so Morgan has a lot of special needs because she can't really care for herself. She's not very independent. So Morgan is 3. She'll be 4 next month, but she's really more like a 5 or 6 month old developmentally. She still doesn't talk. She doesn't crawl. She can roll around and scoot around and things, which is a fairly new development. But she can't feed herself, and she can't stand or walk, so she doesn't do things for herself like a lot of toddlers can. So that makes my life even more interesting than it already is. But you just have to find the support that you can, and you have to be the advocate that your child needs, whatever that may look like. And I'm really, really blessed to work on Performance Today because I have an incredible, incredible team of people that I work with every day to put this show on the air. And if it wasn't for them and their support and their hard work and their skill and excellence in what they do, I wouldn't be able to be the mom that I need to be for her and be able to be here at 8 p.m. So
I take off my hat. I take off your hat to you.
Thank
Scott,
you.
yes, please. Yeah. Scott, one of my favorite things to talk about when we record the podcast is your very intimate and ever-evolving relationship with your father. Mm-hmm. I think that's really touching. And when we look at Clara Schumann's life and her legacy, we've learned that her daughters became, her transcribers and her page turners. They assisted her in every step of the way. How do you foresee, or maybe even how do you hope to see your relationship with Morgan evolve as she gets older and as she grows, and as you grow as well?
Well, one thing I want to say, it goes without saying, and I know all parents can say this, but Morgan has tremendously and absolutely made me a better person, just a better me, a better person overall, just more self-aware, more patient. And there was something I saw on Facebook the other day. Someone had taken a picture of something that they saw somewhere that said, angels sometimes come to us in the form of special kids to teach us how to be better people. And I think as my relationship with my daughter grows over the years, I think that evolution is just going to continue, of her teaching me things that I didn't have before I had her in my life. And I see my life with her as a life of service. I always thought that I would live a life of service, which is why I do the work that I do with Performance Today, which is why I did the work that I did before Performance Today. I was an educator before. I always looked at my life as being one of being in service. But now it's even more so in service to this little girl and who she could be. Because she isn't limited by the disability that she has. So that's how I see the evolution of the what I like to call the adventures of Meghann and Morgan.
Yeah.
As you can see, earlier when I was adjusting your microphone, I dropped all my questions down there. So I'm winging.
You're gonna wing it.
I'm winging it right now.
Straight from the hip.
I would like for you to tell everybody here and everybody listening what it means to be a producer, because sometimes that is such a hard to define role.
That's true.
And there are times where I have come in and you're already there, and there's times when I'm leaving and you're still sat there working. So I want to know how, give them a sense of what the day is like, what the job is like. How can you do that, be a mother to Morgan, do CrossFit, have your life? How many hours in a day do you have? Because I've only got to 24, and you seem to be killing it.
Oh, Scott. Well, when people ask me sometimes, okay, you're a producer. What does that mean? What do you do? I always like to tell people, I make stuff happen. I make the things happen. So what does that look like specifically for Performance Today? That means that I get to choose a lot of the music that you hear on the show between myself and our senior producer, the amazing Suzanne Schaefer. We choose about 90 to 95% of all of the music that you hear on the show every day. And we physically get that music programmed into a schedule so that it will play, so that you all can hear it. So that takes a lot of time every day. I write scripts, I edit audio, I come up with suggestions for cool people to talk to, new music we should pursue. I helped manage social media pages. I even get to interview people like Fred does sometimes.
Nice.
I had the opportunity to be able to create some new series for the show. So I get to also work with all of our young artists. If anybody is familiar with the PT Young Artist Program, I'm the producer for that program. So I get to plan their schedules and their itineraries. I get to fly them here, make sure they get paid, make sure they eat. I get to help them determine what kind of music they're going to play when they're here. I get to help Fred come up with what questions to ask them. And ultimately, I'm the one who then takes those interviews that he does with them, and then I sit down with them and determine, okay, what's going to actually end up on the show and what is it going to sound like? So that's just, some of the stuff that I do.
Well, like the late, great Clara Schumann, the word incredible does not begin to describe you and everything you do on a day-to-day basis and all the work you do. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Morgan, for being here with us. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much,
Morgan
Meghann.
says thank you.
Oh, thank you. Now, this is the final movement, the third of the three romances for violin and piano by Clara Schumann. Now
we know Clara for her piano work, but it certainly sounds like she had a great feel for the violin as well.
Absolutely. And before we open up the floor for questions, Scott, as I was listening to that last movement there, I found myself getting a little misty just thinking about the creation of that music way back in the 19th century, and how for so many years, we've the culture has sort of overlooked Clara's music simply because she's a woman, but how we really get to experience her now. I say all the time on the radio on Music Through the Night, we think of these composers as gone, as dead, but as you've heard tonight, Clara Schumann is very much alive. I just want to offer another thanks to Sofia and Ines for offering that beautiful music tonight. Thank you so much. So if I can invite all of our guests back up, we were wondering if anyone here had any questions for me, for Scott, or anyone you've heard from tonight. So as we're getting set up, think of some questions. I think we have a couple mobile mics if anyone has anything on their mind.
That last of the three romances had piano figurations that sounded like Mendelssohn. I wonder if Clara ever felt indebted to him or acknowledged any influence of his.
Well, we do know that she looked up to Chopin a lot, so you could see some of Chopinesque. Actually, a friend of ours was like, just think about it as a Chopin dance. It's the waltz. His waltzes, you can't dance them. So it's like an undanceable waltz. With the still flowy, but yeah.
Maybe this fellow was referring to the thing I noticed too at the last piece toward the end. Ines, you're doing kind of a rapid fire staccato kind of area, and it seemed like it really caught my attention. There's something seemed to be a diversion or unique about that part.
I think what we noticed immensely in her pieces was a great contrast in character that we tried very much to capture. I think you guys perhaps have noticed it in the third movement, but also in the second movement, in the slow part, that kind of had very sing-song parts, yet also kind of playful in-betweens. And so something that we worked very hard on in the third movement was kind of balancing how she writes in the piano just so many scales up and down underneath the violin's melody. But at the same time, it comes to that part, and you're right, it's staccato, and we actually were practicing and we hit that spot and we kind of went, oh, whoa, okay. How do we do this in a way that we feel like will continue the idea throughout the piece? And I think that's just something that's so amazing about her, is the way she takes such different characters and yet continues to pull an idea throughout all three of the movements even.
If I can just add... when I think about, Mendelssohn was mentioned, and when I think about Felix Mendelssohn, of course, I think about Fanny Mendelssohn, another woman composer who for far too long was not only overlooked, but had music published under her brother's name. So, I really hope to live long enough to be in the world where, when we hear something from Clara Schumann's music that makes us think of Mendelssohn, that we think of Fanny Mendelssohn, because we know that Fanny Mendelssohn, Clara Schumann, they were, just two of the many women who helped, not just add to the classical repertoire, but form its very skeleton, form these feelings you're talking about in each of these romances, these different feelings and these different aesthetics. I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Fanny Mendelssohn as well. So yeah, thank you for both of those questions. Are there any other questions?
If you don't ask us, we're going to start asking you.
Listening to her music and hearing about her life, I wonder what do we know about her day-to-day life? How much help did she have raising 8 kids and doing all this other stuff, for example?
One of the things that I've learned in my research of Clara Schumann, when I was talking with Meghann, I mentioned how her daughters grew up to really, assist her in the day-to-day. And I think that's an important aspect of Clara to remember, is that alongside, again, being a musician, being a muse, she was a phenomenal mother, so much so that her daughters were inspired and wanted to help keep that music going and keep that art going. Of course, we know about her husband, Robert Schumann's demise, his struggles with mental health, and her doing all of that and dealing with all of that while taking care of the kids and while writing the music. Life was a lot different back then, and all the more reason to really celebrate her legacy and her music.
When we were putting this evening together, we would sit in meetings, and everyone would go around and talk about where they were in their part, and they'd get to me and they'd say, "Well, Scott, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Represent male fragility, maybe." But one of the things that I think about is, what music did she write that we don't have? What have we missed? The fact that after Robert died, she went back out on tour and played his music. I just feel like I'm hopeful that with these stories coming out, that everyone starts to pay attention to good music, whether it's composed by a man, a woman, no matter their color, their sexuality. Let's just make it about good music.
Are there any other questions or any comments or any feedback or anything? Sure, Julie, our very own. She's going to ask me a hard question.
No, I'm not. But one of the things that I want to make sure people are aware of, and maybe you are, is that she literally was as popular and as famous as Franz Liszt in her day. And we still hear about Franz Liszt and how he did this, he did that. And, she was out there competing on the same level. And she was helping to make her husband famous, other men to become famous. And she didn't get to do as much composing as she had hoped to do, because that kind of got put on the back burner. As you can imagine, she actually had 7 children. Unfortunately, one died in infancy, but still, that's a lot of kids to raise. And then she went out after her husband died, and she became the primary breadwinner, and she was for most of their marriage, too. So as a working mom, that just blows my mind. I mean, when I first learned about her, 25 years ago or whatever, I literally was like, oh my God, she was the original supermom.
And Julie, what you've said reminds me of the word equity, and we talk about that all the time on our podcast. Julie, when you say that Clara Schumann was as popular and as out there as Franz Liszt. Well, Franz Liszt is a name that we all know, but Clara Schumann is not a name we've always known. So when we specifically on the Trilloquy podcast, when we really focus on music by people of color, music by women, music that comes from places that we may not have typically heard it before, it's all in response to just the societal challenges that so many people have had over the centuries, and in many ways still have, not just in classical music, but outside of it. So as you know, I think I said at the beginning of this presentation that Clara Schumann isn't just a phenomenal woman of classical music, but a phenomenal person in classical music. But I never mean to underscore, or I never mean to diminish the fact that she was a woman, because again, despite being a mother, despite living in the 19th century in a world, in a Europe where it was unseemly for a woman to compose, she still did, and thankfully we have her music. So I think it's always so important to remember those things when we're listening to classical music, specifically music written by women. Well, I'm getting the hand that we're done. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to all the guests, for being here. This has been phenomenal. You can listen to Trilloquy, trilloquy.org, or subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much, guys. The first live recorded opus of Trilloquy under our belts. Scott, we did it.
First of many. I like that a lot. I'm looking forward to doing more of those.
And what I was excited about was that, this opus of Trilloquy wasn't maybe our spiciest episode, our most controversial opus, but the audience that we were in front of isn't necessarily our target audience, but they it seems like they reacted to it. It seems like something that they appreciated, especially with that live music. Another shout out to Sofia and Ines for just providing. Oh, I mean, you will never get me to overlook live performance and the magic of that, and not just live performance, but world-class live performance. They sounded really great.
They did, and I really think that this opus of Trilloquy points in the direction where this music and this radio format of public radio is going to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had people of color, women, and then over on the left there's me. The one white guy. I think that it was. I think that it gave a good snapshot of where we're headed and who's going to take us there, which is the likes of you and Melissa and Sophia and
Meghann, who we heard from,
and Meghann as well.
So a shout out again to the audience that came to watch that. It was so much fun. Again, not our typical audience. Maybe they're
the stereotypical public radio audience.
See,
but
you're allowed to say different words than I'm allowed to say.
You mean older white people?
Sure. Well,
okay, I'll say it.
Well, okay, that's fine. I'm allowed to say. And you're allowed to say that. So on the next opus of Trilloquy, Scott, we're going. I'm making myself vulnerable next time because we're going to church, and on the next opus, we'll talk a bit about my relationship with church, and I'm going to be honest, Scott. I'm nervous about next time because I have very opposing views to the space we're going to be in. Where you and I, this coming Sunday, as we record this, we're going to visit Minnesota's very first Black church. And their music director and their keyboard player is a guy named Jacob Dodd. I met him back when I played with the Philharmonic here in the Twin Cities a few months ago. We talked. He's the music director of this very important Black musical institution in the state of Minnesota. So after we visit his church, Jacob's going to come into the studios and we're going to have a little bit of a chat with him. So, yeah, I'm nervous but excited.
Be listening for it next time on Trilloquy.